All right, so there's 22 left in a 109 on ACR. This is a tournament I play frequently, but we're really down to it, and there's 47,000 up top. There's a lot of stacks in the 10 to 20 big blind range, and we are doing really well. We're fourth overall. We have 68 big blinds. The tournament chip leader is directly to our right and has been opening a ton. They have like 120 big blinds. They fold to us in the cutoff, so they're finally out of the way. We have Jack of spades, 10 of spades, and we elect to open to 2 big blinds.
Quick question, Chris. Is anybody behind you a shove stack? Like 18-ish blinds, yes. Less than that? Yeah, you have a couple shove stacks. Do you have clear plans for those shoves?
I am thinking, so there's the button is the main villain in this hand, has about 45 big blinds. The 2 blinds have around 15 or 18 big blinds, and I am thinking I probably have to raise fold in this spot with this hand to those blinds, but I'm not too worried about at least the small blind. They're very passive at this point.
Oh, that's good, because the big blind is the most likely to flat out of the smaller stacks, just based on general poker strategy. All right, what happens next? So
the button off of 45 big blind stack, 3 bets to 6 big blinds, and it folds back to us.
Okay, it's kind of awkward, right? Jonathan, do you ever put in a 4-bet here?
No, not with this hand. I really want to have a blocker. And unless this button has been 3-betting me precipitously, I would just get out of the way, move on to the next hand. We know when we open, I would be thinking, I know when I open Jack 10 of spades, when I get raised, I just have to fold, right? Like, and while there are a bunch of 15 to 20 blind stacks, means they're going to have to fold sometimes. Since we're at the stage of the tournament where a lot of people have that, I like that we're opening, but I think we should just fold. We're out of position with a hand that really plays way better in position than out of position. I know we're getting a price, but the stack to pot ratio for the effective stack is like 3.5 to 1 or something like that. I just want to dump it right here. What do you think?
I got to tell you, I do not have that fold in me. Are you kidding me? Jack 10 of spades? We're starting 45 blinds effective. It's a beauty. It's an opportunity to chip lead the tournament. That's what that hand represents. And I do think that we should have a fair amount of 4-bets in this exact configuration when we like not with Jack 10 of spades. I think this is a hand that fits perfectly into the calling bucket. I don't think folding is reasonable at all, and I hate that idea. I'm very much for calling with this hand, 8-9 suited, 9-10 suited, those types of hands. I think if we have like king queen off or ace x anything, it's a pretty clear 4-bet unless we're dealing with just a clear psycho with the 45 blinds, just due to the stack configuration and the stage of the tournament.
So what hands are you raise folding then? If you're calling 9-10 suited and you're 4-betting king queen, stuff like that.
Like Jack 10 off, hands like that. It's much simpler raise fold.
What else though? Like you say things like that. Like what are other hands in your range
against? Well, I think that we don't necessarily need balance in a spot where we have a 45 blind stack or a 68 blind stack, and there's a lot of 10 to 20 big blind stacks. So I think we're going to have way too many 4-bets for balance, and it's going to include pretty much anything that we open that includes an ace. Hands like king queen and king jack off that don't want to take a flop out of position, and I think we can flat with the pretty suited hands and some pairs with good enough implied odds with the 45 blind stack. And I think what we're folding is the stuff that we're kind of stretching with, like the Jack 10 off. You know, if we're opening a hand like King 10 off, we can just get rid of that. Hands like that. Hands that just don't feel good to play out of position, and we don't really want a 4-bet because they don't have enough of a blocker value.
I guess we just disagree on that. Fair enough. Like I think at this stage of the tournament with the stacks so short, trying to play a hand like Jack 10 suited out of position, it's just going to be tough when we flop one pair. We just could lose a lot of chips. It's set up, I think, to be problematic. But all right, so there you go. We already disagree, Chris. What did you do? You didn't fold. I know that.
I didn't fold, otherwise it'd be pretty boring. So I called, and so the pot's about 14.5 big blinds, and the flop comes ace of spades, 6 of spades, 6 of hearts.
Okay.
That's an interesting flop, obviously.
Yes, it is. So we elect to check, and the button bets 5 big blinds.
5 into 14.5, ace 6-6.
No folding now.
No, but this is a flop that you can't really raise on unless unless the button is consistently 3-betting you. Then they're going to have a lot of random stuff, and your raise is not like a great story, but they're kind of trapped into not doing anything about it. But if they have like a relatively normal 3-betting rate, I don't think we can raise here. What do you think, Jonathan?
I don't think we should be raising much either here. We also set ourselves up for some really bad spots if we raise and we don't get a fold right away. You know, like we're now at a 1-to-1 stack to pot ratio effectively, and we're kind of forced to shove most turns. You know, and by a hand that is probably not that interested in folding if they called our raise, but maybe kings are being sticky. Like we put ourselves in weird spots where we hate check folding a turn, right? But we hate shoving the turn too. So I don't think we can raise here reasonably. Also, we're not supposed to be able to have ace king. They are, right? Like stuff like that. So it feels like range wise, it's just better for them. I think it's a call, and it sort of sucks, but we're at least limiting the damage by just calling.
I agree. I call. I also feel like neither one of us really ranks to have many sixes. So, and they rank to have the good aces, like you're saying, and I probably have fewer of them. So, pot is 24.5 big blinds. The turn is the jack of clubs. We check.
Yes,
and
we do.
Button bets 18 big blinds into 24.
Well, this is poopy. I mean, the jack is meaningful in that sometimes now we're beating some of their bluffs. Unfortunately, we block a lot of their natural continuing bluffs like king 10 of spades, hands like that, queen 10 of spades. So if they just have to, like, do we have any sort of profile on this player, Chris? Do we know anything about them?
They are, from my basically observation, and I have about 100 hands with them, they're a good, like a decent player, but they are not wild. They're I would call them like a pretty standardly, moderately winning player. They're not exceptional. They don't get out of line too much, but they also are, they would have bluffs here if they could find them.
So do you think, like, some players who are good players are going to have, like, the bottom of their ranges continues here, like 8-7 of hearts or hands like that? Do you think they're that type of player, or do you think they're a little bit more passive than that?
More passive than that. I can imagine them having one good spade in this spot, maybe that kind of bluff, maybe, but I can't imagine them having 8-7 of hearts.
Like king, queen off with the king of spades kind of a thing?
Yeah, something like that.
I got to say, I feel like I can't really see a world where we can continue. I know we hit the jack. It's cool. This guy just bet a lot of their remaining stack. Once in a while where we have the best hand, tough to realize that equity from out of position. Even in position, it's tough to realize that equity, I think. I don't want to do anything but fold here. Grant, what do you want to do?
Yeah, based on your player profile, I agree. I think we have 11 outs, and they're not always clean. There's a chance that either a jack or a spade, we still lose. There's definitely a chance of that. And that's not a good enough price. And there's not a lot of implied odds that make up for that lack of a price. And it feels like in poker, you're not supposed to have a pair and a flush draw and fold is what it feels like. It's just like, that's such a powerful hand nominally, but with the board paired and the polar nature of the flop, I do agree with Jonathan. I think we're supposed to dump it at this point.
I mean, I think the stacks being as short as they are also really matters. If we're 300 blinds deep and he bets 12 and a half blinds or 18 blinds or whatever, we can call with a pair and a flush draw much more often because the damage isn't that big a deal. But here it's much more devastating to call. By the way, get there and lose or miss. Like, all these things suck now because it's really eating into our stack and building up the stack of the guy right on our left, which isn't great either.
Yeah, we miss. We just check fold. And, like, I guess there's some worlds where it goes check, and they just gave up with king high. Like, that does happen sometimes.
Yes.
It's possible.
I think, though, a lot of people have give ups on the turn on these ace high, relatively dry boards on the turn. Once we call, it looks like we have ace jack, ace queen, and we're probably going to station them, right? We're much more likely to have that kind of a hand than spades. There aren't that many configurations of spades where we can raise call on the pre-flop even with. There's some, sure. I think there's way more aces that we're going to station with, and they're just going to be like, all right, I check, either to bluff catch or to or just to give up.
Yeah.
I just want to
And
go away.
if I were in the three betters position, I would be concerned that the jack was a high enough card that my opponent might think I'm chopping a lot of the time, that I'm not winning with my ace, you know? So yeah. Yeah, I think it's a fold. What'd you do, Chris?
Well, I did. I think in retrospect it was a fold, but I did not fold. I elected to call. I think I was too seduced by the pair plus flush draw.
Yeah.
And there's not much to go with. I think this is the big decision spot because at that point the river is the four of diamonds. I check, they check, and they turn over ace three of hearts. So, it's one of the hands. Like 2 hands later, I bust this tournament. I go out in 22nd, and I had this giant stack because I lose aces versus queens. But I think this is the hand where I would have survived that cooler if I had played it differently. And I think this turn call was one. But I just wanted to sort of check about the turn call because I think it's one that maybe is seductive, but I probably need to learn to lay down.
Yeah, I think it is a fold. And I'm not saying necessarily this hand, but it also does really indicate the power of a 4-bet in a spot like this. Like you're just winning pre-flop a lot, and you're establishing something with this player for the future of this tournament, that like you are not one that you can just 3-bet light. So I'm not saying this hand necessarily, but I just, it's something to re-explore. But yeah, I agree. The turn was a huge inflection point, and I do think it's a fold, but I understand the seduction of the pair and the flush draw for sure.
But that's poker. Poker is all about the siren call of putting more chips in the pot, and sometimes you have to resist, right? You just have to.
It's so hard sometimes.
Sick and tired of being tired of being sick. In my head 24/7, how I'm supposed to pay the rent. Mr. Practice, I don't play. Friday nights we on the bench, trying to come up with a play. If it don't work, then hit a lick. 12 knocking at my door, pain ain't tell. I'm studying her word, prayer. Baby Excel, got away with way too much. Should've got expelled, but the school saw my potential. Smart kid trying to rebel.